Hey YouTube, happy holidays. Sean at Top 5 Fit. Been getting a couple of questions within the past couple of weeks during the holiday season, and they kind of fall into the category of what's the minimum amount I can do to maintain my waistline and not gain a ridiculous amount of weight. So, and before we go into this, a little bit of a disclaimer. We all know, at least I think we all know, I assume we all know, that there is no singular approach to fat loss, to fitness. It is always going to be a broad perspective. You need to cover many, many different categories to bring it all together to, make the best you that you possibly can. But when I was in college, and one of the courses I took was an adaptive PE course, and it basically forced us to figure out our teaching style. And mine is known as guided discovery, which ultimately focuses on the environment. Having said all of that, I cannot place some type of exercise regimen or some activity that you can actually make progress towards, even knowing that you can't have that singular approach. It's still progress in the sense that you're doing exercises that you wouldn't normally be doing. And that's always a win when it comes to you making the best version of you can. So understand all of that, and also kind of what's going on right now. The reason some of these questions are getting posed to me is because of what's going on. The holiday season is upon us, which basically means a couple of things. For a lot of people in this country, it's colder. When it's colder, the body tends to want to put on body fat. Your caloric intake tends to rise just a little bit. And as much as everybody fights it and complains about it and makes it seem like it's the end of the world, your body's kind of doing instinctually what it's meant to do. Add calories in the colder weather, put on an insulator, not something that's just unattractive, which ultimately is going to make the scale go up. And that's what's driving a lot of you crazy. So if you can understand that that's what's happening, it's a little bit easier to navigate going through your own diet, your own training habits, and getting things kind of in line and focusing on what's important. The second thing you have to understand is during the holiday season, we are kind of a culture of food. People tend to express emotions and love and care and so on and so forth with a baked item or some overly fattened, overly salted, food thing that ultimately makes you think of home and happy times. So personally, I'm never going to get to the point where I say no to my mother's mac and cheese, but I try to plan for that a little bit throughout the year and make sure I'm not eating everybody's mac and cheese up until that point. So these are some things that are going on that are kind of thwarting your efforts when it comes to getting the results that you want, which is why I started with that whole there is no singular approach. So even if you do all of the 5 exercises that I'm about to show right now, if you don't take in those other factors, into consideration, you're kind of missing the point, and ultimately you're just going to be disappointed. But these are some things that you can kind of add to the regimen that are pretty difficult. They're actually really challenging. It's one of the reasons I called them the top 5 core exercises that kick my ass. I have a tendency to go after things that I'm not good at during this time of year. With all that extra caloric intake, you do tend to be a little bit stronger. You can summon up a little bit more energy going into the workout, so it's a nice time to actually break away from your consistent regimen and start throwing in some activities that really kind of make you work and focus more on form, as well as how clean you can actually produce the movement instead of just rep count and load. So having said all of that, let's get into top 5 core exercises that kick my ass. Okay, the first core exercise that kicks my ass: chain pikes with shoulder extension. Now, in previous videos, we've done chain pikes themselves, or if you have TRX cables, you can use those. Take and put I like to put the balls of the feet on the bar behind me and ultimately wrap the toes, keeping the hands right up underneath the shoulders. Pull through the basically lower abdominals and the hip flexors. Tap hamstrings on the bar behind you. Bring it back to as close to parallel to the ground as you can. To add a degree of difficulty to this and to turn it into one of the exercises that kicks my ass, we add extension at the shoulders at the bottom of the rep. So once we get back to parallel to the ground or close to, this is where we'll actually start taking the shoulders and extending and bringing the entire body. You already see me shaking a hair. and then bring back to the start position of the pike. When it comes to exercises like this, rep count doesn't necessarily matter as much as cleanliness of performance. You want to try and get as flat out, as laid out, and as extended as you possibly can while keeping that contraction in the lower abdominals and the hip flexors. Be very mindful of the fact that as soon as you release tension across your midsection, all of your body weight will settle into your low back, and that can hurt. So make sure you're taking your arms out very slowly, very controlled, and maybe only an inch at a time until you completely understand what you need to contract to keep the movement safe. Let's take a look at one more rep of that. Number 2 core exercise that kicks my ass, single leg kettlebell leg lifts, as well as, I don't want to call it an Indian style sit, but that's what they called it when I was learning it in gymnastics classes as a collegiate cheerleader. And in the interest of being politically correct, don't call them Indian sits, cross-legged sits, alternated legging sits. And we're doing those while we're actually off of the ground. So let's take a look at those real quick. Okay, what you want to do is start out with the kettlebells pretty much right next to your hips. Now you can use dumbbells, but preferably with the handles parallel to the ground. There's a lot of videos going around right now with balance work on dumbbells where the bell is actually down and you're kind of adding to the degree of difficulty by increasing the amount of danger. I try to keep things safe here. So use stable until you're comfortable with unstable. I have my kettlebells here. They're obviously pretty round, but there is, a bit of a smaller base at the bottom, and that gives me enough space to balance on. So you want to start off with the kettlebells right next to your hips. Hands go right up onto the handles. You're going to pick yourself up off of the ground. Now, ideally, I'd like to try and keep the bones of the forearm in line with the grips on the kettlebell. If you start getting too far in, you can actually push the kettlebells out and then fall, and that's uncomfortable. So these bones, you want to try to line up with these grips, okay? So we pick ourselves up off of the ground, lined up, legs straight, toes pointed. Trying to keep as little weight in the heel that's down as possible, we pick up one leg, straight as a board, toe pointed, and then the opposite side. And you can see from the shaking, they are challenging. All right, the third core exercise that kicks my ass is same position as the single leg lifts. The only difference is we're going to go for hold time on this one. So we're back on the kettlebells, hips off of the ground. Start by bringing the feet up underneath you, almost in an Indian style sit. And then what we're going to go for is picking both feet up off of the ground, as well as contracting through the abdominals to make that happen. Number 4 exercise that kicks my ass, weighted pikes. Now, there's a million ways that you can do these. Again, I'm just kind of working off of the material that I have. This is my bench. This is where I like to do them at. If you're going to do these in large commercial gyms or so, stability matters. You don't want to rock right or left when you've got a plate over your head. So whatever surface you decide to do it on, make sure it's flat, make sure it's stable, and make sure that if you do happen to roll right or left, there's no risk of you getting hurt. Having said that, take a 35-pound plate. You want to get it onto your back. Now, to warm up for this, start with the plate right above your head. Bring your arms as close to parallel to the floor as possible, and then bring it right back up. What you're essentially doing is a lat pullover. Once you get to the point where you're comfortable with where the plate's actually pulling you, bring your legs together, point your toes, and then this time when you bring your arms up, you're going to bring your legs with it. Okay, the number 5 core exercise that kicks my ass, dynamic low back extensions using number 3 / 50 pound of resistance per band resistance bands. So starting position for this, you're going to want to be on the floor seated, and you want the bands to be at tension before you even start. Now, hand position is kind of up to you. Personally, when I first learned how to do these, I kind of grab on the outside, thumbs in. I've seen people stick their hands inside and grab down, and it's really just kind of a comfort thing. I'm just used to being out here because ultimately I like to challenge the grip as well while this is going on. Choke up onto the band just enough to where you actually feel it pulling you forward. Now your knees, I like to keep them bent. Some people like to go straight. But personally, I know I have tension within the hips, and it helps alleviate that just a bit by keeping my legs apart while this is going on. So I dig my feet in, heels in, so that I'm not sliding, holding on to each side. Start to lean back all the way until you're flat to the floor, and then back up. Now right here we have basic back extension. So as we lean back, we're contracting the QL, tightening the glutes, and then bringing it back up into a beyond 90-degree flexed position. That's why I like to open the legs to get into the hips a little bit more. By the way, side note, this particular drill was taught to me by an instructor I had at Strong Style for a while by the name of Victor. Victor was in his 50s, extremely powerful, extremely fast, and could hurt me at the drop of a dime. I listened to what he has to say. So every time we would start any kind of a session, we warmed up with this particular drill. The dynamic component gets thrown in when you start hitting angles. So we lean back. I'm actually going to round to the left, bring it back center. Take that same half circle pattern and then bring it to the right side. And then back to the center, just so that you have a variety of movement within the extension plane. Thanks again for watching Top 5 core exercises that kick my ass. Again, I want to make sure you guys have a good holiday season. Enjoy the time with your friends and family. At the same time, we're going to be producing a lot more videos, so make sure and hit the subscribe button. And of course, if there's anything you want us to cover, please leave it in the comment box below. Thanks again.